know from the largest study done on gut health to date showing that the wider variety of foods you eat, the healthier and happier your gut is. You have trillions of gut bacteria. These trillions of bacteria help so much with mood and bowel function, every process in your body. And the way to keep those trillions of bacteria healthy is by feeding them, by eating a variety of foods, because your trillions of bacteria are picky eaters. They don't like the same foods. And so if you're eating this really small amount of foods, you're slowly shrinking your microbiome. One of the things that we have our clients do is like a stress assessment. And the point of it is to show them that like even good things are stressful. And so while like a HIIT class might be really helpful for some person, it might not be super helpful for the next person.
Heather, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So I want to talk to you about gut health. It's really been having its moment, I would say. You know, people are loving chatting about what's going on in our gut, the gut-brain connection. And then, you know, we almost want to tap into the experts like yourself and go, okay, well, actually, what is really going on? So I want to ask you, in your opinion, how the conversation has changed. Where is the spotlight been shining on gut health, and how is the landscape of it kind of changed in the last even like 12 months, even 6 months?
That's a good question. And I would say that when we first started talking about gut health, people were very focused on probiotics and what probiotic you needed for healthy gut. And now the landscape has changed and the conversation has changed to focus more on prebiotics and fiber and foods, which is good. I think that people are finally understanding that it's not always about food elimination for gut health, but that it's a much more robust system. It's much more about what foods you're actually adding in to support your gut health and how even things non-food related affect your gut. Things like your environment and your stress and your sleep and how you're taking care of yourself, even your thought patterns, etc. So I do feel like we have seen a big shift in even the last 12 months, like you mentioned, more towards that inclusion when it comes to gut health versus exclusion or just a specific focus on probiotics.
Because it's almost been like quite an interesting wave of discussion, because it was very much everyone's gluten free, dairy free, intolerant, and bloating, and all of these things. And then, as you say, you're
Mhm.
taking all of these things out, and then suddenly, really, no one can eat anything, and
Yeah,
everything's free from everything. And then suddenly you're like, oh, wait, hold on, maybe we should actually add some things in, add a bit of fiber in, which is
hmm
actually quite a 180. And I'm sure a lot of people are like, hold on, but I don't want to add all this stuff back in because I'm scared that I'm going to have all of these symptoms. Because to be honest, like gut health symptoms, if when you've got poor gut health, it's pretty grim, it's pretty uncomfortable, it's not something that's very glamorous. So then the thought of, okay, I need to add more in is probably quite, there's a bit of pushback probably on that, because it feels very counterintuitive to the narrative that was before.
totally. It feels very counterintuitive and a little scary. We often work with clients that are eating the smallest amount of foods that they've ever eaten, yet they feel worse than they ever had. And sometimes they have that realization like, oh, yeah, I do feel worse than when I was eating X, Y, and Z food, but there still is a lot of fear adding that in because they haven't quite connected the dots yet that perhaps the reason they feel so bad is because their gut is super depleted and because they've cut out all these foods. But in their mind, they're thinking, oh, I'm still missing whatever the food is that I still need to cut out. And in fact, it's the opposite problem. Especially on testing that we do on our clients, we'll often see just really depleted microbiomes. We know from the largest study done on gut health to date was showing that the wider variety of foods you eat, the healthier and happier your gut is. You have trillions of gut bacteria. These trillions of bacteria help so much with mood and bowel function and every process in your body. And the way to keep those trillions of bacteria healthy is by feeding them. And so the only way that we can feed them is by eating a variety of foods, because your trillions of bacteria are picky eaters. They don't like the same foods. And so if you're eating this really small amount of foods, you're slowly shrinking your microbiome.
I remember speaking with someone and they, really enjoyed dairy. They had dairy as a normal amount as someone would. And then they
Mhm.
did a few months in Kenya and they didn't have any dairy. And then they came back to the UK and had dairy. And suddenly their stomach was like, no, 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 we're not having that.
Mhm.
Completely not working. So to put like a specific example in with maybe people that you've worked with, like real life examples here, are there people who say they are lactose intolerant or they are gluten intolerant and they've not, like, they react when they have it? Are there examples that actually they've added a bit of gluten back in, or what does it actually look like in terms of a real life example, this adding stuff back into someone's diet?
Yeah, there's many examples I could give you, but I'll give you one for gluten and for dairy. So we had a client probably, I would say a year ago now, and she had gone to another practitioner. They told her that she needed to be gluten and dairy free, and she wasn't a big dairy person, but she really enjoyed like sourdough and pasta and all of those things. And she was working with this other practitioner and just not really making any strides. So she got on a call with me. We chatted about it. I looked at some of the testing that she had and I'm like, none of this is indicating to me that you have any kind of gluten issue. Were you tested for celiac? Like, what am I missing here? And she's like, oh no, they just put everybody on gluten and dairy free. And she said, this is not going to work for my life. Like, I love to make pasta and do all this stuff. So her main goal when she worked with us was to be able to add gluten back in. And it took some time because your gut is adaptive. So there are specific enzymes that you need to be able to break down gluten. And so because she had restricted it for so long, her body had to get used to tolerating it again. We also needed to address some of the underlying things going on in her gut to make it just a easier environment for her as well. But as we worked on those things and then we systematically added things in, we typically will go in the order of like sourdough first, sprouted grains second, and then just like a regular white pasta last to allow just the tolerance to improve. I mean, she's eating gluten, no problem. And so we really just had to allow her body to adapt. Now, on the dairy side of things, that is a tricky one sometimes because there can be a lot of reasons why someone would all of a sudden not tolerate dairy. But the reason that I'll give you of this example is we had a client who had, similar to your friend, they had traveled abroad. They had gotten something, they got sick while they were there, came back, had all these GI issues. Dairy was making them really gassy, really bloated, lots of diarrhea, etc. We did some testing. Turns out this client had picked up Giardia, which is a parasite, and Giardia will temporarily make you lactose intolerant. So once you clear the Giardia, the lactose intolerance improves. And so I have to wonder sometimes how many people that has happened to, where they travel abroad, or even, I mean, this can happen living in a modern country. But they get sick, they all of a sudden become lactose intolerant out of nowhere. And perhaps it is something like that. Obviously, that's an extreme example, but once you clear that, once you heal the small intestine, lactase, which is the enzyme that breaks down lactose, is produced in the small intestine. So as you heal SIBO or Giardia or any other thing going on there, your tolerance to gluten, dairy, some of these harder to digest foods should improve.
But I guess once people have had those symptoms, they're not really going to want to bring dairy back in or have a little bit of pasta or anything because they're scared. They're like, "Oh, I probably don't want to add that back in." So it's
Yeah.
quite tricky because you won't really realize that. So where does these parasites come from? Maybe this is a really basic question, but is it like food poisoning, or obviously, the less food hygiene goes down, we kind of question what else is adding in. But what are
Hmm.
these parasites? Because you said, you could have it in quite a modern country as well.
Yeah.
What is the parasite? What is, like, if we can define it, and then also where does it come from?
Yeah, so you can get parasites from lots of things. You can get parasites from being in the soil. You can get parasites from unwashed produce. You can get parasites. Kids are big targets for parasites because they put things in their mouth. They're constantly touching things and putting their hands in their mouth. So the testing sometimes will show more parasites on kids, but Yeah, you can get them from unwashed produce, soil, water, lakes, pools, streams, just any kind of open body of water. They're just organisms that are a part of our environment, and they're not always problematic, but they can be problematic. And so, if somebody has a parasite that they picked up from somewhere and all of a sudden have symptoms out of nowhere, then it probably is causing a problem. But we do live in community with parasites all over the place, and they're not always causing problems. Your stomach acid should kill off any parasite that you ingest, but if you have a weaker digestive system or your digestive system is strained, you're more likely to not kill that off, and then it can take up residence in your gut and cause some problems.
Is it linked with our immune system? Like, is there a certain level of the healthier our gut, the more resilient we are to, a dodgy meal or something like that? But then equally, what does a lacking or low immune system gut sort of look like? Is it someone who's eating lots of processed foods or not a very varied diet? If we can kind of go with both extremes, what does it
Mhm.
actually mean?
Yeah. So, kind of going back to your first question or our first conversation around a variety of foods, one of the main ways to improve your gut immune system is through eating a variety of foods. Because when you eat a variety of foods, those fibers from foods feed your beneficial bacteria, and what they produce is something called short chain fatty acids. Short chain fatty acids are the byproducts of fermentation in the gut. And essentially, what that means is basically your gut bacteria are producing these byproducts that are really beneficial for the gut brain axis, for inflammation, overall immune system. And so, when someone has a shrinking microbiome or really low levels of bacteria, good bacteria in their gut, they will have a poor immune system. And to your point, they might be more prone to getting something from a dodgy meal, I think is what you called it. So,
Dodgy takeaway. I don't know that. Like,
yeah. So by keeping your gut healthy, you should be able to kill off, not even just parasites, but any other infections or things that you come in contact with. So if you're constantly the person that's getting food poisoning or getting sick or getting a stomach ache from things, like perhaps it's what's going on in your gut. That's the problem.
that's really interesting because a family member went through chemotherapy for breast cancer treatment and therefore it wipes out everything. And
Mhm.
therefore, the good and the bad. And I guess it's a very extreme example of antibiotics, isn't it? Which wipes out everything. And therefore, if she eats something that's even not like remotely like everyone else is fine, the sensitivity is just very, very elevated. Like any, 1% not fully there and it'll be brought back up. The stomach is just like, no, 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 we're not digesting this. It's kind of crazy how the protective level is there. And I guess that is, the immune system is trying to get rid of anything that is a threat,
Mhm.
ultimately, and only accepting stuff that's good. And if we can't really break that down, if it's very sensitive, if it's very weakened, it makes sense really that that is not going to digest that. So yeah, just I'm thinking
Mhm.
out loud here. But
Yeah.
yeah, that it is interesting how it does that. But is there ever, we talked about how people can bring it back in, the obvious ones are the gluten and the dairy and so on, back into their diet. But is anyone ever too far gone, with these fad diets, with these extreme, nutrition paths that people follow? There's a lot of damage that people can do for their gut, the binge eating, the fasting, the everything like that. Is it ever too far gone to bring back to a healthy gut health?
I would say most of the time, no. Obviously, there are extremes to every circumstance. If someone has been abusing laxatives for years and pieces of their colon are dead, essentially, then you're not going to make maybe a full recovery. But we've seen really extreme cases where clients have come to us saying they want to put in a gastric pacemaker. Can you? I want to try to avoid that, or I'm they're saying they need to take part of my colon out, etcetera. I want to avoid that. And it's amazing what you can do by really getting in there and addressing what's actually going on. I really think that 99% of people are not too far gone. And I don't want to say 100 just because there always will be outliers, of course, in various circumstances. But the cool part about the gut is that you can literally change your gut microbiome in one meal by eating more fiber, by having more diversity, by having more colors, by having more polyphenols, all the things. So it doesn't take a ton of change to really make a significant impact, as long as you're consistent with it.
And to paint the picture specifically, what sort of average standard treatment plan would you prescribe? Obviously, it's very going to be tailored for different people, but say your average person, it's not, a massively medical threatening issue like, you alluded to there. What sort of thing would you suggest in terms of adding things back in? What does that look like?
Yeah, like you said, everybody's going to be a little different and it really depends on just like the landscape of their digestive tract. So I'll give you an example. So if what we're looking at is just a really depleted microbiome, I often refer to the microbiome like a parking lot. So here in the US, we have this store, it's called Target. I don't know what to compare it to, but it's basically like this huge store. They have clothes, they have makeup, they have cleaning supplies, they have books, they have everything. And so the parking lots for these stores are huge. There's thousands of parking spots. And that's kind of like your gut. There's lots of parking spots. You want good bacteria to be parked in all those parking spots. What happens is if the parking lot's open, riffraff is going to come in and throw a party in the parking lot. You don't want parties in your parking lot. Or people are going to park there and leave their junky cars there that they don't use or whatever. And so the goal is to have the parking lot always full of good shopping patrons, right? And so sometimes we will see where just the parking lot's just empty, like just totally empty. And then in other cases, we will see where like there is a parking lot party going on with unwanted bacteria. And so in either of those situations it's going to be a little different. With a depleted microbiome but no party, you can add in foods maybe a little bit quicker where you're just slowly and strategically adding in different types of fibers, and we like to start with like resistant starches, which are cooked and cooled potatoes, rice, starch, which can help feed beneficial bacteria. They're typically more tolerated. Polyphenol rich foods, which are like the dark, deep purple, blue foods, green tea, etc. And then we can move on to more fermentable prebiotic fibers, things like onions, garlic, leeks, etc. So that's one scenario. The other scenario is if there is a parking lot party, we might have to address that first. Maybe we need to like weed the party out using antimicrobials or different things and then work on adding those foods back in. So that could take, for some people it can take 4 to 6 months. For other people it could be quicker than that, where it's, a couple weeks to a couple months.
Yeah, it's super interesting, really. I guess everyone's so different, but I love the example of the parking lot party of like who do we have here? Let's go through each individual
Yeah.
and kind of what is causing what. And in terms of, you alluded to at the start, it's not always just about food, even though it is our gut and there is the symptoms from our stomach. There's a lot of different things that go into that and they all connect into that. And we've got, lifestyle, we've got stress, we've got sleep, and all of these factors. I guess lifestyle can then span into so many, and then stress can span into so many things as well. Where does that come into the equation of you looking at someone's health, gut health? Where do you
Mhm.
factor it in? What are the importance to you?
Yeah, I always tell our clients you can't out supplement a poor lifestyle. Like I can give you all the supplements in the world, but if your nervous system is dysregulated, you're not sleeping, you're drinking too much alcohol, whatever it is, I cannot out supplement that. And so for everybody, that's going to be a little bit different because for everybody, their triggers are going to be different. Maybe somebody can tolerate less sleep than another person, depending on what their sleep needs are, depending on what life stage they're in, depending on how stressed they are during the day, etc. So figuring out what the right balance is, for that person. Also, just like foundationally making sure that person is eating enough, and not exercising too much, getting kind of that Goldilocks mentality, like not too much, not too little, uh, with a lot of things, of course. So, yeah, really lifestyle is so foundational to the whole process, which is not always the fun stuff to change. It can be fun to get some new supplements in the mail and think about trying them. It's not always as fun to be like, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to chew my food really well, I'm going to take some deep breaths. But those are the things that actually really help.
I know it sucks a bit, doesn't it? We want the shiny new things, but we don't
Yeah.
wanna actually do the habit
Yeah.
changing, taking stuff out actually, just kind
Mhm.
of not very glamorous, it's not very fun, but adding stuff in is a lot more fun. Getting good sleep is hard, but one thing I find that helps is investing in premium nightwear. Not only does this regulate your body temperature, enhance your comfort, and promote deep sleep, but it ensures that you feel good and look good while doing so. I've partnered with Cozy Earth, who make luxury bedding and loungewear to help you maximize your rest. With a mission to elevate the everyday, their range of butter soft viscose bamboo pajamas, plush weighted cuddle blankets, and gorgeous bed linen ensure that Cozy Earth products not only make you feel better, but sleep better too. Cozy Earth have kindly given you a discount code to unlock your better sleep so that you can rest better this year. Just enter the code Happy Smiling People at checkout to get up to 20% off your Cozy Earth products. All products have a 10-year warranty and a 100-night sleep trial, meaning that you can try any item, and if you don't fall in love, simply return it within 100 days. And remember, an investment in your sleep is an investment in you. Now back to the episode. The definition of stress, you alluded to it there. You know, there's so many things that come under stress, and it's not always negative. It's
Mhm.
stuff that raises our cortisol and our body responds in a certain way. So, a really great exercise class still counts as stress. It's still stress to our body. You know,
Mhm.
like a surge of adrenaline is still stress, and it's not always bad. And I think that stress, it's something I've talked about quite a lot on this podcast. And I think my view on it is sort of changing a bit because it gets a bit of a bad rap, but actually stress is a biological response to a situation that we're in. And it's funny because, we're not necessarily in such a life-threatening situation as maybe our ancestors have been. So therefore, when our heart rate raises and stuff, it's not necessarily that we're about to be, the classic one is like eaten by a bear or anything
Yeah.
like that. But it still responds in a certain way, and we can actually use that to our advantage. We can channel, oh my goodness, I've got a deadline tomorrow, I'm a bit stressed by that. We're probably going to have really focused attention
Mhm.
and concentration and bang that workout pretty quick.
Yeah.
We can really
Yeah.
channel it in a way, and it's not always bad.
I One of the things that we have our clients do is like a stress assessment, and the point of it is to show them that like even good things are stressful. So like your exercise class like you mentioned. And so while like a hit class might be really helpful for some person, it might not be super helpful for the next person because maybe they're a mom and they're not sleeping through the night and whatever else. And so it's always matching like what's going on in your life to what your stress tolerance is. And there are ways that you can improve your stress tolerance, but also having digestive issues is stressful, not only mentally, but physically. If you have infections or a parking lot party going on in your gut, that already is adding to that stress bucket. And so your stress tolerance might be lower. Once you get rid of those infections, your stress tolerance improves. So that you have to take into account as well.
And do you work with people through that? Is there pointers that you kind of help people with, or is it more identifying that and they sort of make alterations in their life as well, or do you focus mostly on the gut?
Yeah, I mean, we're addressing the whole body. So all the way from minerals to food to the gut to their sleep to their habits to their thoughts, their nervous system.
The whole
One of the cool
package.
things, the whole package. One of the things that we started in 2025, which has been huge for our clients, is nervous system coaching calls just because we often found that like there were these limiting beliefs and things that were keeping people stuck, and there having specific support around that was so critical for people, being able to move past like the thought of like, what if I always struggle with this, or this is not going to work or whatever. Like really getting to the root of those beliefs that were weighing them down. So yeah, you have to address the whole system.
What are the questions that you ask on those nervous system calls? Do you have some set ones that sort of open it up?
No, so we have actually a nervous system coach that comes in. I don't run those calls. And she uses like really cool like tapping techniques and these like integrative exercises to help people, and it's honestly amazing to watch. Just like the transformation that can happen.
Yeah, it is wild. And then the links as well of how it's all linked together. It's
Yes.
just it's mind blowing the more
Mhm.
that you look into it. And I want to also ask you about the digestive health, but then also the gut health. Are they the same thing? Are they different? What's the link?
I guess technically they would be the same thing. Digestive health might be more related to like how you're digesting and absorbing, et cetera. And gut health, I guess, could be more like your actual, gut bacteria, et cetera. But I think that most people use those terms interchangeably and maybe don't know the difference. But yeah, pretty much the digestive tract is the whole digestive system. So from your mouth all the way to where things come out, it's a open tube. So your stomach, your pancreas, your liver, your gallbladder, your intestine, small and large intestine, etc. There's a lot of organs involved in digestion, and that would be the digestive tract. Whereas, like, your gut microbiota is like the collection of bacteria that are in the gut.
And can you tell me your experience with, the digestive health, the gut health that brought you to be so passionate about it?
Yeah, so I was the kid that always had GI issues. I honestly didn't really realize that it was an issue until I was more aware that not everybody's stomach hurt after they ate. Not everybody couldn't go to the bathroom. And as I entered my like early teenage years, I realized like there is something not right, with my system. And unfortunately, it was a time and day where really we didn't know a whole lot about the gut microbiome or anything. And so the solution was take Miralax or eat more fiber. And I had tried all of those things and nothing was really working. And so went to school to try to figure it out. And really all I learned in school was about like food elimination. And to be honest, I graduated college feeling worse than when I came in and thought, how am I supposed to help other people with nutrition if I can't even help myself? So I entered the world of dietetics as a dietitian, just thinking, I think I chose the wrong career. I was working in a hospital. I was trying to help patients that were way sicker than me on the oncology floor and the renal floor. And just felt like a complete imposter. And it wasn't until I started learning about functional and integrative nutrition where everything really changed for me. I realized that everything was connected. My stress, my grief, my overtraining, my undereating, my food restriction, a lack of sleep, etc., how all that was actually impacting my gut and had never really thought about it that way. And so at the time, I had left the field of dietetics. I was actually working in a sales and marketing role, and I did love it, but I really did miss the world of nutrition and went back to school to get my doctorate. And that's really where everything clicked for me. And I thought, okay, if I can fix myself, then I can finally help other people do this too. And so I made myself basically my own case study and then started practicing these things with my clients and getting amazing results and realized like people need this information. And so that's really what landed me here now, with the program that I have and everything else. So it's been a wild journey, but I think especially in health, a lot of people get into it for selfish reasons because they've had a personal experience or a family member experience. And although I wish my GI issues on no one, I am grateful that I'm here because I don't know that I would have studied to the depth that I did if I hadn't been struggling with my own symptoms.
It's funny how you describe it as selfish reasons, because I guess, maybe you could say it like that, but it also makes you super passionate about it because there's that like relating, I've been there, I know how you feel, I know how uncomfortable it is, I know how stressful it is, and we're going to get through it. And especially when you're addressing quite personal issues,
Mhm.
it's the lifestyle factor, the more you sort of poke into that, the more
Yeah.
personal and vulnerable really people will become, like, where is this lack of sleep coming from? Where is
Mhm.
this stress coming from? Where is this binge eating coming from? There's lots of different emotions around that. And it's a very emotional thing, food. It can be really great, but then it can also be like a coping mechanism, but it can also be just like a real stress point in itself. And there's a lot of guilt that can come with that as well. So then saying, okay, actually, you need to add in more food, or you need to add in this, or you need to add in that, that's maybe okay for your average person. But then a lot of people, or some people certainly, may actually push back on that and say, well, that I don't want to put on weight. I don't want to get fat. I don't want to have that trigger, and it comes with a lot of emotional baggage, especially because it's not like you're just walking into, your office and you're there. Probably there's been a lot of steps that people have gone through before they
Mhm.
end up in your office. There's a lot of, you know, baggage, I guess, for want of a better word.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with that food guilt? Do you see it? Is that a thing? And how do you deal with it?
Yeah, I mean, most of our clients come to us having feeling like they've tried everything and will typically tell us, if you can't help me, I don't know who can. This is kind of my last try. And while that's an honor, it's also a big responsibility. And it also is why we're so comprehensive having the nervous system coaching calls, having the level of like food and symptom support that we have, because it's never as simple as like just add this food in. There's always a lot of beliefs behind it. And so whether that belief was from another practitioner or a family member or themselves or whatever, we have to work through those beliefs and really get to the core of why is it hard to implement these things. And usually it goes years and years and years back of why they don't want to do things, and just like unraveling kind of some of that diet culture that can be involved in it, or just fear, figure out where that's stemming from. And it really takes a super comprehensive approach. Otherwise, they stay in that nervous system state of freeze. And we could tell them to do things all day long, but they'll never implement if they're fearful. And so that's where really the nervous system piece comes in, of like believing that you are a person who make changes. You are a person who has this new identity of like, I don't have gut issues. And sometimes even getting rid of that identity can be hard. So it's a lot more of a layered approach than you might realize, just kind of looking at it at face value.
Yeah, I never really thought about the self narrative discussion there because, self narrative, it is in some ways, predicts our future short term. If you go into something thinking I'm going to absolutely fail at this, you're
Mhm.
likely to not perform to a high level because you're literally telling yourself you're not going to. And your all your
Exactly.
focus and energy is basically going into that. Whereas if you walk into somewhere being like, I'm gonna be able to do this, I'm gonna be able to do this, you're probably gonna blag it quite well. You're probably gonna do some bluffing and you're probably gonna do okay. And I say probably because obviously there's extremes on both sides and all that. But then if you actually are saying to yourself, "Oh my goodness, I've eaten this dairy-filled product and I'm going to bloat and I'm going to have all of these symptoms and it's all going to go wrong," or "I'm eating all of this food and I'm not going to sleep tonight and I'm a really bad person because I'm going to put on loads of weight because, food is bad and da 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 da." And it's a very strange, like self-fulfilling prophecy
Hmm.
because it does actually come true. That's the really painful bit about the whole self narrative, isn't it?
Hmm.
Because
Yeah.
if it's good, it works great. If it's negative, it also, tends to come true. And also it's really hard to undo that. And it's so
Mhm.
subtle as well. Often you really have to pick back the layers and maybe you need someone, maybe a friend, a family member, or, a professional like yourself to actually point it out because it can be so ingrained. It can be there for years. It can be there since, you're a early teenager. Where does it come from as well? It can be so subtle.
Hmm.
So it's
Yeah.
really hard to rewrite that because ultimately you believe it because it does come true. That's the rubbish part of it, isn't it?
Mhm. Yeah, you have to take on a new identity. And sometimes, like you said, if we have someone that comes in to work with us with the mindset of like, this is not going to work, you're right. It's not going to work. You have to take on the identity of like, I am willing to put in the work, and when I try new things, things happen. Like looking for evidence. When in your life have other things shifted? When in your life have you been able to follow through? When in your life has something turned out better than you could have hoped? Like whether it's related to your gut or not, you have to be able to look for that evidence to then take on that new identity. Um, and that can be hard at first, especially if you feel like you have tried a lot of things and failed.
And it's a process, you know, it's constant. It's not like you wake up and you say, "Great, this is gonna work," and that's you
Yeah.
done. It's several times a day, it's the start of every day, week on week, when, you know, the novelty of this new thing is worn off and maybe people are thinking, you know, "Heather, this is so great. I love you know, meeting with you all the time to Heather, stop telling me what to do." You know, it's they still need to
Mhm.
have that because I guess there's the novelty of it and then there's the it gets painful because it's behavior change. And that's when you perhaps become the bad guy slightly. And it's
Totally.
quite difficult then for people to continue that belief because it starts to hurt. And that's when it works. That's, you know, that's the frustrating part. That's when you're kind of pushing through. And it is that it can go either way, but you need to
Mhm.
do it. And it's so easy to say that now, but any sort of behavior change is painful, especially when it's, you know, negative self-talk or self-doubt and then it's linked to things like body image or stress or sleep, all the fundamental parts that really,
Mhm.
you know, keep our brain going.
Yes, totally.
Yeah. And then there's quite, I guess, with a lot of conversation about gut health, you know, recently, but then, you know, it has been kicking around for a while. There's consequently, you know, lots of social media discussions, there's lots of perhaps ill advice as well. What sort of things do you find that you're battling against? What are some myths that you would like to bust metaphorically? Um,
Mhm.
what do you see commonly that people come, you know, with that belief of, well, this is going to work, and actually you go, oh my goodness, let's start there because that's not good.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of them we've alluded to. Definitely the like you have to be gluten and dairy free for a healthy gut. That definitely is not true. Um, that's not what we've seen in research. That's also not what we've seen clinically. Also that like you have to take a probiotic for a healthy gut. I much would prefer somebody to prioritize prebiotics and fiber over probiotics in most cases. There's obviously specific cases where that can be helpful. Um, I would say another one is more related to like the treatments that we do, but that they just need to constantly be killing bacteria in their gut. And that's where testing can be really helpful because, like I was saying with the parking lot analogy, sometimes that's actually not what's going on. There's not a party in your gut. There's just not a lot of cars parked in your parking lot. And so, if we went in and tried to bomb your gut with a bunch of antimicrobials, we're actually making a problem worse. And so it's not always about just killing off bacteria. Sometimes it's more about rebuilding the gut. I'm sure there's others, but I would say that those are the main ones. Is just you have to really be specific about what's actually going on with your gut so you know exactly what to do with it. It's not necessarily some kind of cookie cutter plan of like, well, this worked for my friend Susie, so it's going to work for me.
And what does that look like long term? If we use maybe the example of you yourself, how
Mhm.
does it look long term? You've solved the big issue in terms of you have a healthier day to day life, a more comfortable day to day life. But what does it actually look in your daily habits? How have they changed? What does it look like long term? Because it's not like you're overhauling everything every day. You know, it's a big effort, but then you actually create these sustainable habits. But what are they? What do they look like?
Yeah, and I think it comes back to that identity. Like, I am someone who loves to take care of my health, or whatever that belief is. And over time, everyone's different, but you learn what the biggest needle movers for you are. For me, I know that stress is a big factor. I know that sleep is a big factor. I know that there's certain times that I might benefit from certain supplements or other things. And so, the cool part is not just even me being a practitioner, our clients will learn this too. They'll learn, oh, hey, when I do that thing, when I travel, I tend to become more constipated, but I know that I can do X, Y, and Z to fix it. And then that way I'm not totally going back to square one. Or I know that when I'm in a stressful period of life, like these three things are really helpful for me to not have a setback. Or I know that like the biggest needle mover from a diet perspective is getting fiber with every meal and being prioritized, making that a priority. And so that's the cool part is as you learn your body and as you learn your root causes of really what got you in that situation in the first place, you can know what you need to do long term to maintain it. Does that mean you'll never have a setback or never have a symptom again? No. But the cool part is that you know how to address the symptoms when they come up so that they don't put you back at square one, and you feel empowered that you're not going to freak out about it. It's like, huh, you can be curious about it. How interesting. I traveled and I'm a little constipated instead of like, oh my gosh, I'm so constipated. What do I do? Even just the response your body has between those two, like curiosity versus fear, you're going to be able to problem solve a lot if you're like, huh, how interesting. Okay. Well, I know that X, Y, and Z really helps me. So I'm going to try those things and see how it goes, instead of panicking about it.
Yeah, exactly. It's the tools that you are equipping people with. And then they come into this situation and they actually don't have that big spike of stress, which would just make it worse. And as we said before, the confidence of,
Hmm.
hold on, okay, yeah, the symptoms are there, but I can handle this. I know what to do. I'm going to keep calm. I'm going to breathe. It can be as simple as, a deep breath can make such a difference. A big glass of water
Hmm.
can make such a difference. And of course, there's so many other things that are more technical. But in terms of like the low lying parts that pretty much everyone can have access to wherever they are in the
Hmm.
world,
Yeah.
that, those are the tools that are in the toolbox. And I guess that is the habit creation. And not only is it the actual habits in terms of drink water, breathe deeply, etc., but it's just that mindset habit creation as well of, I've got this. Okay, it's fine. It's not going to escalate into a huge thing. I'm not going to go back to square one. It's actually all going to be okay. It can be as
Yeah.
simple as that, can't it?
Yeah. Totally.
Just kind of to summarize a little bit, what would be the biggest piece of advice that you would give to someone who is just wanting to improve their gut health, wanting to, live a healthier lifestyle? Maybe they're thinking, oh, what actually is my self narrative? And maybe like, what are the first
Mhm.
steps that you would recommend them taking?
That's a great question. And I would say step number one is get curious about your symptoms. Instead of judging yourself for having these symptoms, your body is obviously giving you those cues for a reason. So, why is it giving you those symptoms? It's telling you something about your current habits, your current health that it wants you to pay attention to. So, just get curious. Huh, why am I so constipated? I wonder if it's because I am dehydrated. I wonder if it's because I need X, Y, and Z supplementation. I wonder if it's because I haven't slept so well the last couple nights. I wonder, just I wonder if it's this, I wonder if it's that. So get curious about your symptoms. Number two is I wouldn't try to fix everything at once. There's a lot of things that you can do to improve your gut health, whether it's hydrating, drinking minerals, taking digestive bitters, going on a walk after meals, eating a variety of foods, etc. Pick one thing and get really consistent with that, then move on to the next thing. And then number three, I would prioritize 30 plants a week. Plants are fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, legumes, herbs, spices. So there's a lot of things that fit into that category. And that is how you're really going to create this robust parking lot. So lots of different plants, lots of different variety. Try a new one each week. If you go to the grocery store, try to pick up something new. And then we just call it plant points. So you count your plants and hope for getting close to 30, but it really is easy. If you make a spaghetti sauce or I don't know what they call it where you here it's called spaghetti sauce, but
Yep.
a tomato sauce, you can put, mushrooms or zucchini or onions, garlic, a bunch of different things in there to add a bunch of plants into one dish.
Amazing. Yeah, some really tangible things as well that we can do that aren't massively frightening or scary. It's just those little small habits that just, it's the small habit creation as well that's so important. And Heather, if people want to learn more about what you do, work with you, follow you online, where should they go?
Yeah, so probably the easiest place to find me is on Instagram. It's just my name, Dr. Heather Finley. I have a free quiz. That's a great place to start. If you just send me a message with the word quiz, you'll get the link to send it to take the quiz. It takes 2 minutes and it will help you identify what could possibly be causing your digestive issues. So that's a great place to start. And then you can find me on my podcast, the Love Your Gut podcast as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining, Heather. That I feel like, yeah, we did cover a lot, and it's just those little things, isn't it, that make such
Hmm.
a difference. And
Yeah.
just reiterating that again and again and again, the little things, and you can do
Mhm.
it. It's self narrative. So yeah, a lot of takeaways, and thank you so much for bringing all this great conversation.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.